The rain fell like liquid metal on the dying world of Cathara Prime, each droplet carrying the toxic residue of a war that had raged for 7 cycles. In the shadow of a collapsed weapons facility, something moved among the twisted wreckage. It wasn't human. Commander Sarah Chen adjusted her scanner's frequency, squinting through the green-tinted visor of her environmental suit. The Terran Expeditionary Force had been combing through the abandoned hegemony outposts for weeks, searching for salvageable technology and survivors. What they usually found were corpses and empty shells of once mighty war machines. Movement detected, Sector 7 Alpha. She reported into her comm unit, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Could be a survivor. Could be a survivor. Quote, "Copy that, Commander," came the reply from Lieutenant Marcus Rivera, her second in command. "We're en route to your position." Sarah picked her way through the debris field, her boots crunching on crystallized sand that had been fused into glass by plasma fire. The hegemony had been humanity's most dangerous enemy, a coalition of 12 alien species that had declared war on Earth's expanding colonies 3 years ago. Their technology was superior, their numbers overwhelming, and their battle tactics ruthless. That's what made the scene before her so puzzling. Trapped beneath a massive piece of twisted hull plating, something thrashed weakly. At first glance, Sarah thought it might be a hegemony soldier. But as she drew closer, she realized she was looking at something else entirely. The creature was roughly the size of a large dog, but its anatomy was clearly alien. 6 powerful legs ended in razor-sharp claws, and bioluminescent stripes pulsed along its sleek, midnight black hide. Most striking were its eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle formation on its elongated skull, glowing with an intelligent amber light. The creature's breathing was labored, and dark fluid seeped from wounds along its flanks. It was dying. "What in the hell?" Rivera's voice came from behind her as the rest of the squad arrived. "That's not in any of our xenobiology databases." Sarah knelt beside the trapped creature, ignoring the protests from her team. Standard protocol dictated that they should neutralize any unknown alien life forms immediately. But something about the creature's eyes stopped her. There was no hostility there, only pain and what looked disturbingly like hope. "Commander, we should fall back and call for a containment team," Sergeant Kim Park advised, her rifle trained on the creature. Could be some kind of biological weapon. The creature's head turned toward Sarah, and she heard something that made her breath catch. A soft, melodic whine that sounded almost like a dog asking for help. It was impossible, of course. Convergent evolution didn't work that way. But the sound was unmistakable. "Lower your weapons," Sarah ordered, already moving to examine the debris pinning the creature down. "Ma'am," Park's voice carried a note of concern. "I said lower them." Sarah's tone brooked no argument. She activated her suit's external speakers and spoke softly to the creature. "Easy there. We're going to help you." The creature's struggles ceased immediately. All 3 eyes fixed on Sarah's face through her visor, and its ears, she could see them now, pointed and mobile like a bat swiveled toward her voice. Rivera joined her at the debris pile. "This thing weighs at least 2 tons. We'll need the portable crane from the shuttle." "Get it," Sarah said without taking her eyes off the creature. "And bring the emergency medical kit." "The med kit's designed for humans, Commander. Just bring it." While Rivera coordinated with their shuttle crew, Sarah studied the creature more closely. Its body language was remarkably similar to that of an injured Earth canine, the way it held its head, the slight tremor in its limbs, even the way it seemed to be trying to make itself smaller and less threatening. But this was clearly a predator. Those claws could tear through combat armor, and the muscle definition visible beneath its hide suggested explosive speed and power. "Commander," Park said quietly, "look at this." Sarah followed Park's gaze to a section of debris near the creature's head. Half buried in the rubble was what looked like a collar, but made from some kind of iridescent metal she didn't recognize. Strange symbols were etched into its surface. "It's domesticated," Sarah breathed. "This is someone's companion animal." The implications hit her like a physical blow. The hegemony didn't keep pets. Their member species were too pragmatic. too focused on efficiency and conquest for such sentimentality. But someone had cared enough about this creature to give it a collar, to mark it as belonging to them. Which means it might not be hegemony at all, Rivera said, returning with the medical kit and a progress report on the crane. Could be from one of the neutral worlds they conquered. Sarah opened the medical kit and pulled out a trauma sealant spray. It was designed for human physiology, but the basic principle should work on any carbon-based life form. She held it up where the creature could see it. This might sting a little, she said, then felt foolish for talking to an alien animal that couldn't possibly understand her. But when she began spraying the sealant on the creature's wounds, it held perfectly still, watching her with those unsettling, intelligent eyes. The bleeding stopped almost immediately, and the creature made another of those soft, grateful sounds. The shuttle's crane arrived 20 minutes later, operated by Corporal James Wong. It took careful maneuvering to lift the debris without causing further injury. But eventually, the creature was free. To everyone's surprise, it didn't try to run. Instead, it remained lying on the ground, looking up at Sarah expectantly. "What do we do with it now?" Wong asked. Sarah was about to answer when her scanner erupted in warnings. 3 hegemony patrol ships had just entered the atmosphere, moving fast and heading directly for their position. "We need to move," Rivera shouted. "Now." Sarah looked at the creature, then at her team preparing for immediate evacuation. Standard protocol was clear. Leave no trace. Take nothing that couldn't be carried easily. A wounded alien animal definitely didn't qualify, but as she turned toward the shuttle, the creature struggled to its feet and took a hesitant step after her. It was clearly in pain, probably couldn't walk more than a few meters without collapsing. If they left it here, the hegemony would find it. Best case scenario, they'd put it out of its misery. Worst case, the hegemony wasn't known for mercy. "Load it into the shuttle," Sarah ordered. "Commander?" Rivera stared at her in disbelief. "You heard me. We're not leaving it for them." The creature seemed to understand what was happening. As the team gently lifted it onto a stretcher, it remained calm, occasionally making soft sounds that might have been communication attempts. During the flight back to their base ship, the UES Defiant, Sarah found herself studying the alien companion more closely. Its breathing had stabilized, and the wounds were healing faster than should have been possible, even with the trauma sealant. There was clearly more to this creature than met the eye. The collar, too, proved interesting under closer examination. The symbols weren't from any known hegemony script, but they weren't random either. There was definitely intelligence behind their creation. "What are you?" Sarah murmured, reaching out to gently touch the creature's head. To her amazement, it leaned into her touch, closing all 3 eyes in what looked like contentment. The gesture was so familiar, so reminiscent of every dog she'd ever known, that she felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. "Ma'am," Rivera said from the pilot seat, "what are we going to tell Captain Morrison?" Sarah had been dreading that question. Captain Morrison was a good officer, but he was also a strict adherent to regulations. Bringing an unknown alien life form aboard a military vessel without authorization was a court-martial offense. "We tell him the truth," she said finally. "We found a survivor and administered aid. He's not going to like the fact that the survivor isn't humanoid. Then we'll deal with that when we get there." The Defiant's hangar bay was nearly empty when they arrived, most of the other shuttles still out on patrol. Sarah had requested a direct route to the quarantine section, hoping to avoid attention until she could properly brief the captain. But as they wheeled the creature through the corridors, it began to show signs of distress. Its breathing quickened, and the bioluminescent stripes along its hide began flashing in rapid patterns. The soft whines it had been making grew louder, more urgent. "What's wrong with it?" Park asked. Sarah didn't know, but she had a suspicion. The Defiant was a warship, built for conflict. Every surface was metal, every sound was mechanical, every smell was industrial. For a creature that had clearly lived in natural environments, it must have been overwhelming. "Let's get it to quarantine quickly," she said. But the creature had other ideas. As they passed a viewport showing the star field outside, it suddenly struggled to sit up, making a sound unlike anything they'd heard before. It was haunting and beautiful, a harmonic call that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull. And from somewhere deep in the vessel, another voice answered. Sarah's blood went cold. There was something else aboard the Defiant, something that could communicate with their rescued creature. Something that had been waiting. The creature's call grew more urgent, and Sarah realized with growing horror that they might have just made first contact with an intelligence far beyond their understanding. The collar around the creature's neck wasn't just ornamental, it was a beacon, and something had been following its signal. Red alert, Sarah spoke into her comm. Captain Morrison to the quarantine bay immediately. We have a situation. As alarms began blaring throughout the ship, the creature looked up at Sarah with those 3 amber eyes, and she could swear she saw something like an apology there. They had saved its life. But in doing so, they might have doomed themselves. The creature's harmonic call echoed through the Defiant one more time. And this time, the answer came not from within the ship, but from the darkness of space itself. Something vast and ancient was coming, drawn by the song of the small creature they had chosen to save. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm, but she didn't draw it. Whatever was coming, whatever they had accidentally summoned, she had the feeling that their survival would depend not on weapons, but on the choice they had made in that ruined facility. They had shown mercy to a helpless creature. Now they would discover if the universe was prepared to show mercy to them. Captain Morrison arrived in the quarantine bay looking like a man who had been expecting bad news, and found it worse than anticipated. Sarah watched his expression shift from annoyance to confusion to outright alarm as he took in the scene. An unknown alien creature lying on a medical table, surrounded by his officers, who were clearly treating it like a patient rather than a threat. Explain, Morrison said, the single word carrying enough authority to silence the room. Sarah straightened to attention. Sir, during routine salvage operations on Cathara Prime, we discovered this creature trapped under debris. It appeared to be dying, and showed no hostile intent. I made the decision to render aid and bring it aboard for study. Morrison's eyes narrowed. You made the decision to violate about 15 different protocols because an alien animal looked sad? Before Sarah could respond, the creature lifted its head and made one of those soft, questioning sounds. All 3 of its amber eyes fixed on Morrison with an intensity that made the captain take an involuntary step backward. Jesus, Morrison breathed. It's intelligent. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Defiant's chief medical officer, looked up from her scanner readings. More than intelligent. Captain, its neural activity is off the charts. The brain structure is incredibly complex, more developed than most of the hegemony species we've encountered. And it's been trying to communicate, added Lieutenant Rivera. Listen. And SCADA 5 working markered. He activated the audio log from their rescue operation. The creature's melodic calls filled the room, and Sarah watched Morrison's expression change again as he heard the unmistakable patterns of language in the sounds. That's not random vocalization, Morrison said slowly. That's structured communication. Reply. That's structured communication. Yes, sir, Sarah confirmed. And when we brought it aboard, something answered it from inside the ship. Morrison's face went pale. From inside the ship? You think we have an infiltrator? No, sir. I think we have another survivor. Before Morrison could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Captain to the bridge immediately. We have multiple contacts approaching at high speed. Morrison was already moving toward the door when Dr. Deteen Vasquez called out, Captain, wait, there's something else you need to know. This creature, it's not from any of the worlds the hegemony conquered. The genetic markers don't match anything in our databases. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying this might be one of them. One of the hegemony species. The silence that followed was broken by the creature itself. It struggled to its feet, ignoring its injuries, and moved to the viewport. Its bioluminescent stripes began pulsing in a rapid, complex pattern as it stared out at the approaching contacts. It's trying to signal them, Park said, her hand moving to her weapon. No, Sarah said, watching the creature's body language carefully. It's afraid, and she was right. The creature's posture was that of a terrified animal seeking protection. It moved away from the viewport and positioned itself behind Sarah, pressing close to her legs in a gesture that was unmistakably seeking shelter. Morrison's comm unit buzzed with an urgent message from the bridge. "Captain, you need to see this. The approaching ships, they're not hegemony. They're something else entirely." 20 minutes later, the senior staff was assembled in the main conference room, watching the tactical display with a mixture of awe and terror. The ships approaching them were unlike anything in their databases, organic-looking vessels that seemed to grow rather than being built, with hulls that pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns they'd seen on their rescued creature. 3 ships, reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from Tactical. Each one approximately 2 kilometers long. They're not showing up properly on our sensors, like they're partially phased out of normal space. "Weapons status?" Morrison asked. "Unknown. The energy signatures are unlike anything we've seen." "But, Captain..." Hayes paused, looking uncertain. "They've made no aggressive moves. They're just waiting." Sarah felt a tugging at her sleeve and looked down to see the creature had somehow made its way to the conference room. It was looking up at her with those 3 eyes, making urgent, soft sounds. "How did it get out of quarantine?" Morrison demanded. "The containment field was still active," Dr. Vasquez said, checking her tablet. "It shouldn't have been able to leave." The creature made a more insistent sound and padded over to the tactical display. Standing on its hind legs, it placed its front paws on the console and began making specific vocalizations while looking at the image of the approaching ships. "It's trying to tell us something," Sarah realized. "About them." Suddenly, the ship's communications array activated without input from the crew. A voice filled the conference room, deep, resonant, and speaking in perfect English despite clearly being non-human. "Humans of the vessel Defiant. We are the Kithara. We have come for our lost child." Quote. Morrison found his voice first. "This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Expeditionary Force. Please identify your intentions. We seek only the return of what was taken from us. You have rescued Zephyr, the young hunter who fell during the battle on Kithara Prime. We are grateful." Rescued. Sarah looked down at the creature Zephyr, who was watching her with what she now realized was complete trust. "Zephyr fell during battle? Against whom?" "Against the hegemony forces that enslaved our people. Zephyr is a battle companion, trained to fight alongside Kithara warriors. When our ship was destroyed, Zephyr was lost. We feared the worst." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "The hegemony enslaved you? But you're clearly more advanced than they are." A new voice joined the conversation, younger and somehow more familiar. "Sarah Chen, of Terra. I am Keeper Thane. Zephyr has shared memories of your kindness through our neural link. May I speak with you directly?" Sarah looked at Morrison, who nodded grimly. "This is Commander Chen. You said Zephyr shared memories? Kithara battle companions are more than animals, Commander Chen. They are partners, linked to their keepers through quantum consciousness fields. When you showed mercy to Zephyr, when you chose to save rather than destroy, we felt it through the bond." Zephyr moved closer to Sarah, nuzzling against her leg in a gesture of pure affection. The bioluminescent stripes along its hide pulsed in what looked like a contented rhythm. "The hegemony enslaved your people," Morrison said. "But you have ships that could easily destroy theirs. Why haven't you fought back?" "Because we are not warriors by nature," Keeper Thane replied. "The Kithara are explorers, scientists, philosophers. Our technology is advanced, but it is not designed for conquest. When the hegemony attacked our research stations, we were unprepared for their brutality. So you trained battle companions," Sarah said, understanding beginning to dawn. "To help you fight back." "Yes. The companions you call battle hounds are volunteers from our youngest generation. They undergo neural enhancement to become living weapons, bonded to keeper warriors who guide them in combat. But the process is difficult. Many do not survive." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her medical scanner. "That explains the neural complexity. And the accelerated healing. This isn't a natural creature, it's been enhanced. Zephyr was one of our first successes. Keeper Thane continued. The youngest to survive the enhancement process. When our ship was destroyed, losing Zephyr was like losing a child. Sarah knelt beside Zephyr, who immediately pressed against her, making soft, comfortable sounds. But why did it respond to us the way it did? We're strangers. The enhancement process does more than increase intelligence and combat capability, Thane explained. It expands empathy, the ability to sense the true nature of other beings. Zephyr knew immediately that you meant no harm. More than that, Zephyr sensed something in humans that we have rarely encountered in our travels, which is the willingness to sacrifice for others, even when those others are different from yourselves. You risked your mission, your careers, your very lives to save a creature you had never seen before. This is not common in the galaxy. Morrison leaned forward. Keeper Thane, we've been at war with the hegemony for 3 years. Our colonies have been attacked. Our people enslaved or killed. If your people are also fighting them, you propose an alliance, Thane finished. The thought had occurred to us as well, especially after witnessing your crew's actions. But there are complications, such as, the hegemony has convinced many neutral species that humans are the true threat. They claim you are an aggressive, expanding species that will consume everything in your path. Some believe them. 18 Jar. Sarah stood up, her hand resting on Zephyr's head. The creature's presence was oddly calming, its trust absolute and unwavering. And, what do you believe? I believe that any species willing to risk everything to save a single injured creature is worth knowing better. The hegemony would have left Zephyr to die, or worse. You chose differently. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display. What would an alliance between our peoples look like? Your species excels at warfare and strategy, Thane replied. Ours excels at technology and exploration. Together, we might actually have a chance against the hegemony. But first, we must retrieve Zephyr and return to our fleet. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. You're taking Zephyr away? It is necessary. The neural bond requires constant contact with Kithara technology to maintain stability. Without it, Zephyr will begin to deteriorate within days. Zephyr seemed to sense Sarah's distress. The creature moved closer, pressing its head against her hand and making soft, reassuring sounds. But its bioluminescent stripes had begun to pulse more rapidly, and Sarah could see the strain in its 3 eyes. However, Keeper Thane continued, we would be honored if you would consider accompanying Zephyr back to our fleet, as representatives of humanity and as the humans who saved our young hunter's life. Morrison straightened. You're inviting us to meet with your leadership? We are inviting Commander Chen specifically. Zephyr has formed a bond with her that goes beyond simple gratitude. Such bonds are sacred to our people. Sarah looked around the conference room at her fellow officers. Rivera was grinning like this was the adventure he'd been waiting for his whole life. Park looked skeptical but intrigued. Doctor. Vasquez was already taking notes, probably cataloging the medical possibilities. Morrison just looked tired. Sir? Sarah asked. Morrison sighed. Commander, this is so far outside normal protocols that I don't even know where to begin. But if there's a chance for an alliance that could end this war. He paused, looking at Zephyr, who was watching the humans with those impossibly intelligent eyes. And if that creature trusts you enough to form some kind of psychic bond, maybe that's worth exploring. So I have permission to accompany them? You have permission to take Lieutenant Rivera and Dr. Vasquez with you on a diplomatic mission to establish contact with a potential ally, Morrison said formally. Try to keep the xenobiological bonding to a minimum. Zephyr made a sound that could only be described as laughter. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself in the shuttle bay, preparing for a journey unlike anything she had ever imagined. The Kithara had sent a small transport vessel, a graceful, organic-looking craft that seemed to pulse with life. Zephyr had perked up considerably as soon as the ship arrived, its stripes brightening to an almost cheerful blue-green. Ready for this? Rivera asked, shouldering his gear. Sarah looked down at Zephyr, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of going home. The creature had stayed close to her all through the preparations, occasionally pressing against her legs as if to reassure itself that she wasn't going to disappear. "No," she said honestly, "but let's do it anyway." As they boarded the alien vessel, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would be remembered as a turning point. Not just for the war against the hegemony, but for humanity's place in the galaxy. They had rescued a single injured creature from the ruins of a battlefield, and in doing so, had opened a door to possibilities they couldn't even imagine. The transport's interior was unlike any ship Sarah had ever seen. The walls seemed to grow around them, adjusting to their presence. Soft bioluminescent lighting provided gentle illumination, and the air itself felt alive, charged with some kind of energy that made her skin tingle. Zephyr led them to a chamber filled with what looked like living seats that molded themselves to their bodies. As the transport prepared for departure, the creature settled beside Sarah with a contented sigh. "Comfortable?" she asked, running her hand through the soft fur along Zephyr's neck. Zephyr looked up at her with those 3 amber eyes and made a soft sound that needed no translation. It meant home. It meant family. It meant gratitude beyond words. As the stars shifted around them and they headed toward an unknown future, Sarah realized that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of history. They had saved one creature's life, and in return, that creature might help save their entire species. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of justice after all. The Kythara fleet was nothing like Sarah had expected. As their transport approached the massive collection of ships, she realized she was looking at an entire civilization in motion. Hundreds of vessels moved in perfect harmony through space, each one unique in design, but sharing the same organic, living aesthetic. Some were clearly residential, with transparent sections revealing gardens and communal spaces. Others were obviously research vessels, bristling with sensors and analysis equipment, and scattered throughout were the warship's sleek, predatory craft that seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. "Magnificent," Dr. Vasquez breathed, her medical scanner working overtime to catalog the biosignatures emanating from the fleet. Zephyr pressed against the viewport, its bioluminescent stripes flashing in rapid patterns that Sarah was beginning to recognize as emotional responses. The creature was practically singing with joy at the sight of home. "Zephyr says they never expected to see this again," came Keeper Thane's voice through the transport's communication system. "The young hunter thought it would die alone on that dead world." "Oh." Sarah placed her hand on Zephyr's head, feeling the warm vibration of the creature's contentment. Over the past few hours, she had begun to sense something else, fleeting impressions that seemed to come from Zephyr itself. Images, emotions, fragments of alien thought that filtered through their growing connection. "Is it normal for the companions to bond with other species?" she asked. "It has never happened before," Thane replied. "The neural enhancement process is specifically designed to create connections between Kythara and our battle companions. That Zephyr has formed such a link with a human suggests something remarkable about your species' neural compatibility." Rivera looked over at Sarah with concern. "Are you saying she's becoming psychically linked to an alien?" "The bond is voluntary on both sides," Thane assured him, "and it can be severed if either party wishes. But such connections are treasured among our people. They represent trust at the deepest possible level." Their transport docked with what Thane identified as the flagship, a massive vessel that seemed less like a ship and more like a living mountain. As they disembarked, Sarah was struck by the difference in atmosphere. Where the Defiant felt industrial and military, the Kythara ship felt alive. The walls pulsed with a gentle rhythm. Bioluminescent veins carried information through organic conduits, and the air itself seemed to whisper with barely audible music. Zephyr bounded ahead of them, its injuries apparently forgotten in the excitement of homecoming. Sarah watched the creature disappear around a curved corridor and felt an unexpected pang of loss. She had known Zephyr for less than a day, but the bond between them felt stronger than many human relationships she'd experienced. "Commander Chen," a voice said behind her, and she turned to see her first live Kythara. Keeper Thane was tall and elegant, standing nearly 8 feet in height. His skin had the same bioluminescent properties as Zephyr's fur, but in subtle patterns that shifted like aurora. His face was vaguely humanoid but elongated, with large eyes that held depths of intelligence and compassion. Most striking were the neural interface ports at his temples, organic-looking connections that pulsed with soft light. "Keeper Thane," Sarah said, offering what she hoped was an appropriate greeting. Thane's equivalent of a smile was a warm brightening of his facial patterns. "Please, follow me. The Council is eager to meet the humans who saved our young hunter." They walked through corridors that adjusted their lighting and configuration as they passed, guided by Thane toward the heart of the ship. Along the way, they encountered other Kithara scientists, engineers, families with children who watched the humans with curious but friendly eyes. Sarah noticed that many of the adults bore the same neural interface ports as Thane, while the children's were smaller and dimmer. "The neural enhancements aren't natural to your species," Dr. Vasquez observed. "They are a recent adaptation," Thane explained. "Developed out of necessity when we encountered the hegemony. Our natural telepathic abilities were insufficient for the kind of coordination required in warfare." "You're naturally telepathic?" Rivera asked, his hand unconsciously moving toward his sidearm. "Mildly so. We can share emotions and basic concepts with others of our kind. Nothing invasive. The enhancement process expands these abilities, allowing us to form the deep bonds necessary for combat coordination." They emerged into a vast chamber that took Sarah's breath away. It was like standing inside a living cathedral, with walls that stretched hundreds of meters overhead and pulsed with soft, rhythmic light. At the center was a raised platform where 7 Kithara sat in meditation poses, their neural interfaces blazing with activity. "The Council of Keepers," Thane said softly. "They are communing with the fleet mind, sharing information and making decisions collectively." As they approached, one of the council members, an elderly Kithara with silver patterns instead of the usual blue-green, opened her eyes and focused on Sarah. "Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force," the Keeper said, her voice carrying the weight of vast experience. "I am Elder Sirna. We are grateful for your kindness to young Zephyr." "It was the right thing to do," Sarah replied simply. Elder Sirna's patterns brightened with what Sarah was learning to recognize as approval. "Yes. But right is not always easy. And easy is not always chosen. Your actions speak well of your species' potential. We understand you're fighting the same enemy we are," Rivera interjected. "Perhaps we can help each other." "Perhaps," another council member said, his patterns darker and more restrained. "But alliance requires trust, and trust requires understanding." "What do you know of the hegemony's true nature?" Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "We know they're a coalition of 12 species united in conquest. They've destroyed our colonies, enslaved our people, and shown no interest in negotiation." "That is what they wish you to believe," Elder Sirna said. "But the truth is more disturbing. The hegemony is not a coalition. It is a hierarchy of slaves." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Sarah felt Zephyr's presence in the back of her mind, emanating confusion and fear at the discussion. "Explain," she said. "The hegemony began as a single species, the Vorthan." Thane continued where the elder left off. "They developed technology that allows them to suppress the neural development of other species, turning entire populations into willing slaves who believe they are free." "Neural suppression?" Dr. Vasquez's eyes widened with horror. "You mean they're controlling their allies' minds?" "Not controlling, limiting. The suppressed species retain their intelligence and personalities, but lose the capacity for independent moral reasoning. They become unable to question orders or resist directives, even when those orders conflict with their own survival instincts." Rivera's face had gone pale. "And they've done this to 11 different species?" "And I think 11 that we know of," Elder Sirna confirmed. "Each conquest adds to their forces, and each new slave species helps them conquer the next. It is a galactic plague that has been spreading for over 2 centuries. Sarah felt sick. "How many worlds?" "Thousands. Billions of sentient beings, living as slaves, while believing themselves to be willing participants in a glorious empire." "But you resisted them," Sarah said. "Barely," Thane replied. "Our natural telepathic abilities made us aware of the neural suppression when they attempted to use it on us. We were able to develop countermeasures, but not before they destroyed many of our worlds and enslaved millions of our people. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle pulse of the living walls. Sarah tried to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. The war she thought she understood, a simple conflict between expanding human colonies and an aggressive alien alliance, was actually something far more sinister. "Why are you telling us this?" she asked finally. Elder Cerna stood, moving with fluid grace to a section of wall that became transparent at her touch. Beyond it lay the starfield, and Sarah could see the running lights of the fleet spread across space like a constellation of hope. "Because humans appear to be immune to the neural suppression," the elder said quietly. "In 3 years of warfare, the hegemony has never successfully suppressed a human mind. You lose the battles, but you never lose yourselves." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "That's why they're so determined to destroy us completely instead of enslaving us. Yes, a species that cannot be controlled is a threat to their entire system. If other races learned that resistance was possible, the whole thing would collapse," Rivera finished. "Which brings us to our proposal," Elder Cerna said, turning back to face them. "We wish to offer humanity not just alliance, but partnership. Your immunity to their control combined with our technology could free billions of enslaved beings." Dr. Vasquez was frantically taking notes. "We'd need to study the neural suppression technology, develop ways to counteract it. Dupling the gather one. We have been working on such methods for decades," Thane said. "But we lack the tactical knowledge to deploy them effectively. Humans excel at warfare in ways we never could." Sarah felt Zephyr's presence grow stronger in her mind, and suddenly she could sense the creature's location. It was nearby, waiting patiently outside the council chamber. Along with the location came a flood of emotions, excitement, hope, and something that felt like anticipation. "There's more, isn't there?" she said, looking at Elder Cerna. "You are perceptive. Yes, there is more. The bond you have formed with Zephyr is unprecedented, but it may not be unique. If humans can form such connections with our battle companions, if your species can resist neural suppression while maintaining telepathic links, you want to create human Cathara teams." Sarah realized. Humans as the tactical commanders, Cathara as the technology specialists, and the battle companions as the living weapons that connect them. The thought had occurred to us. But such partnerships would require volunteers from both species, and training unlike anything either of our peoples has attempted before. Sarah looked at Rivera and Dr. Vasquez, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. This was bigger than anything they had imagined when they rescued an injured creature from a battlefield. This was a chance to not just win their war, but to liberate an entire galaxy. "We'd need to get approval from Earth Command," Rivera said slowly. "And we'd need to test the viability of the human companion bonds," Dr. Vasquez added. "Both reasonable requirements," Elder Cerna agreed. "But first, we must ask, are you willing to undergo the preliminary bonding process with Zephyr? To truly test whether this partnership is possible?" Sarah felt Zephyr's excitement spike in the back of her mind. The creature was practically vibrating with anticipation somewhere beyond the chamber walls. "What would it involve?" she asked. "A neural interface procedure that would establish a permanent connection between you and Zephyr," Thane explained. "It is not without risk. The process has never been attempted with a human subject. But if it works, you would become the first human Cathara battle team. You would think together, fight together, share consciousness, while retaining your individual identities. You would be stronger than either species alone." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling Zephyr's presence like a warm glow in her mind. The creature had saved her just as much as she had saved it, had given her a purpose beyond simple survival, a connection beyond anything she had ever experienced. When she opened her eyes, she found the entire council watching her with expressions of hope and anticipation. "When do we start?" she said. Elder Cerna's patterns brightened to brilliant gold. "Now, if you are willing. Zephyr has been waiting very patiently." but I sense the young hunter's excitement is becoming difficult to contain. As if summoned by the words, Zephyr bounded into the chamber, its bioluminescent stripes blazing with joy. The creature went straight to Sarah, pressing against her legs and looking up with those 3 amber eyes that now seemed to hold infinite depth. Sarah knelt down, placing both hands on Zephyr's head. "Ready, partner?" Zephyr's response was a harmonic call that resonated through the chamber and seemed to echo in Sarah's very bones. It was a sound of complete trust, absolute commitment, and limitless possibility. 3 hours later, as the neural interface procedure neared completion, Sarah felt her consciousness expand beyond anything she had ever imagined. She could sense Zephyr's thoughts as clearly as her own, feel the creature's enhanced reflexes and battle instincts merging with her tactical training. But more than that, she could sense the vast network of minds that made up the Kithara fleet, thousands of beings linked in common purpose. And in that network, she felt something new. Other human minds, other connections forming as her crewmates volunteered for their own bonding procedures. Rivera's disciplined military thinking merged with a young Kithara engineer. Dr. Vasquez's scientific curiosity blended with a healer companion that could diagnose injuries through scent. They were no longer just representatives of humanity meeting with an alien species. They were becoming something entirely new, a hybrid force that combined the best qualities of both races. "How do you feel?" Keeper Thane asked, as the procedure completed. Sarah stood up, marveling at the way her enhanced senses could now detect the emotional states of everyone in the chamber. Zephyr moved beside her with perfect synchronization, their minds operating in flawless harmony. "I feel like we just changed the course of galactic history," she said. Through her link with Zephyr, she could sense the creature's agreement and its absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. Together, they would free the galaxy from the hegemony's control. Together, they would prove that kindness and courage could triumph over oppression and fear. The human who had rescued an injured alien, and the creature who had trusted her completely, had become something greater than the sum of their parts. They had become hope itself, made manifest in living form. And across the galaxy, the hegemony would soon learn that their reign of terror was coming to an end.